All right, so I've removed that little soil mixing edifice surface there, and I'm about to screen things. I'll just show you my screen. This is 1/4 inch carpenter's cloth fabric, they call it, and I've just screwed it to some 2x4s in order for it to be able to rest on the little tub, this little Tupperware tub that I use to catch the soil that I mix. So I just put this guy on top of it and just push the soil through it. Now you may notice there is already soil in the tub. That's because I did some microgreens yesterday and I used the same process for all my microgreens. But I just shove this soil through the tub. Doesn't take too long, but as you'll see, there will be some bigger chunks kind of left out. There are some twigs and bigger pieces of perlite, a kind of rock that they use to improve the drainage of the soils like this. It's really common in seed starting mixes. So because I'm using the soil blocker and because I really care about a high level of seed to soil contact as a more or less professional grower, I'm screening and going through this extra step. But just to reiterate, if you just buy a seed starting mix or you don't care about having like 95 to 99% germination rate, instead you're happy to have 75% or a little bit lower, less consistent germination rate, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to filter your soil like this. Just make sure it's at the appropriate level of moisture for when you set your seeds in it, which we'll do in a moment. Okay, that's it for that step. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make our soil blocks. So I'll be right back with that. Hi, I switched to a different angle so hopefully you can better see what's going on. Point one thing out, I went and got the little mesh insert that I was talking about to help with bottom watering, and this is what it looks like. I ordered it online from, I believe, bootstrapfarmer.com or Amazon. Maybe bootstrapfarmer.com give it to me through Amazon. Could be right in both respects. Either way, you can find it online. And so I have my soil over here and where my soil is going to go over here, and I've got my handy dandy soil blocker. My soil is a little bit muddy like I showed you before, and what I'm just going to do is mix it around here, stamp really good, twist it off. I'm going to brush the excess soil off the bottom, take it, put it over here, let's see if you can see that, and just stamp like that. Pull it up and voila, this is what it looks like. Nice 20 blocks with little dibbles where the seeds are going to go. It's really handy, and I love these soil blocks because if you notice, they got little grooves in between the blocks that allows airflow in between, and actually roots like having oxygen. It's important to roots. We usually think of underground as not having any air or oxygen, but roots thrive off of having a lot of oxygen. So soil blocks are really nice because unlike those plastic trays, they allow oxygen to the roots more easily. Also, when I go to transplant these, I can just break off. What happens is the soil, they hit kind of the air in between in that crack, and they turn because they don't want to go toward the air. So they, what do they call it? They call it self-pruning or root pruning. And most of the roots there will be a little bit of entanglement between these little blocks, but I can just break off those roots really easily that get entangled, and most of them won't be entangled, and easily transplant these. And since I transplant so many, there's going to be 300 in these trays. It's so nice to have it be easy to transplant. So soil blocks are great. They also don't waste as much plastic. Those cell trays break and bust and go bad eventually, and you have to throw them away. So there's a lot of things I like about soil blocks and why I do it this way. But again, on a small scale, a lot of those concerns aren't so big of a deal. So I'm going to finish soil blocking this, and then I will get back to you when it's time to add the seeds to the tray. Alright, so we're back at the top-down camera view with the tray in focus. As you can see, I've got all my little soil blocks stamped out. There are 300 of them, believe it or not, in this little area. And for those who are curious about this soil blocker and the details, this is a 3/4 inch cell. It's sometimes called a mini soil blocker, and that's the size. And believe it or not, those lettuce will live for 25-ish days and be just fine. Their roots won't need any more area than each of these individual cells for that time. And then from then I just transplant them straight in the field. So that's how I approach that. As for seeds, just take your seeds. I use pelleted seeds because they're way easier to deal with. Right? Lettuce seeds are a lot smaller than this, and they're kind of slender and a bit difficult to pick out one by one just by hand. So I use pelleted seeds. It's usually like 15%, 20% more expensive. So for a pack of seeds, that'd be $1 more, probably. You don't have to if you don't plant so many, but since I plant thousands upon thousands of these by hand, this year I went with pelleted because it saves me a whole lot of time. So all I'm gonna do is, I know that this, from experience, that this lettuce seed germinates, it sprouts at like a 99% success rate. So I'm just gonna put 1 seed per cell tray. If you don't know the success rate of your seed and you're just buying it from Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, dollar store, wherever you get your seeds, it might have a little bit lower success rate, so you might want to put 2 seeds per cell, depending on how you want to do it. Either way, works. And I'm just going to put 1 seed per cell, slowly, and fill it up. And that's a very simple and straightforward process. It's made very easy by the fact that there's already a little dibble, a little concave area in each one of these little cells to receive the seed. So I'll do that, and we'll get back to the video once all these seeds have been put into their cells. And we're back. And look how lovely and uniform and satisfyingly symmetric all this looks with those little tiny seeds in it. I did manage to successfully drop a few in between the cracks, and believe it or not, those will sprout. There's a couple here, and from my past experience, I know that usually it stays moist enough for those to germinate and they find their way to the soil, and that's okay. I will thin them out later. All that remains now is to cover these up, wet them, and bring them to the right temperature to, that's funny, the camera is mirrored. Well, if you're good at reading things backward, you'll notice that I have a bag of something called vermiculite here. Horticultural vermiculite. And what this is it's a kind of mineral that is it's reminiscent of sand, and it retains moisture really well. And I find it to be better than just about anything else for covering up your seeds really lightly, and it keeps moisture next to the seeds, which is key for germination, but it also doesn't invite kind of bad stuff that can happen when you cover them with soil, like damping off. So I just sprinkle a light amount of this horticultural vermiculite. It's very fine. If you can see, the texture of the particles is very small, right? Get it as small as you can. The smaller the better. And you just cover them up really lightly, just enough to barely cover that little seed. They don't need much to cover them, and most seeds, I believe lettuce is one of them, need a little bit of light to germinate, or benefit from being close to the surface at least to germinate, because this little seed evolved to be out in the wild. And seeds have a tendency to stay dormant if they're too deep in the soil. We don't want that to happen, and we also don't want this lettuce in particular also goes dormant when the temperature is too high to germinate. So we also don't want it to get too hot. That's why it's tough to grow lettuce in the summer all the time, though. There's some tricks that you can do to make that happen. But I'm just going to cover these with fine, light sprinkling of this vermiculite, and then I will wet it down, and then it will be just about ready.